I think the number one question I get from new homeschoolers is, what is notebooking? I have no idea what to do. So notebooking is kind of a made-up word, made up in the last 30, 40 years from homeschooling. And I guess it's been used in other places. For instance, Leonardo da Vinci, he was famous for his notebooks, and here's a picture of some of them here. And it kind of looks random. He's just writing famous quotes as he hears them, sketching things. It's like his idea book. Now, I have something like that on my phone. I have an app where I just throw all my ideas, and I'm full of ideas, so that's a lot of things. And you can also take a picture and put up a picture with it, and you can draw on it. So if you have a pen that you can write on the screen of your device, you can draw in it. My son has a notebook that he bought that has just a few pages that are blank, and on the bottom of each one is a QR code, and he can snap a picture of whatever he draws or writes on that notebooking page and snap a picture with his phone, and it uploads to the cloud, and then he can cook his book in the microwave and it erases the pages. So this is notebooking, and this is notebooking in the greater world. Lots of people do it. You do it too. I'm sure you have an idea sometime and you grab a sticky note and write your idea down and plop it somewhere. That's notebooking. Now, how in the world would we use it for homeschooling? Well, I think originally it was meant to be a place where you could copy something that was important and remember it. It didn't used to be that we could keep our devices with us everywhere we went and have a handy way to snap a picture or record a screenshot of something. Back in the day, back in old-fashioned times, you had to write something down if you wanted to remember it. If it was important to you, you would. And a lot of people would carry a little notebook in their pocket and just pull it out and make a note of something. In fact, I know a very wealthy gentleman that does this now. He doesn't even use his device. He still writes with pen and paper on a little notebook that he's stuck in his pocket. So, for children in homeschooling, I feel like our society has gone away from the notebooking idea of Leonardo da Vinci or famous presidents or so on. We have gone away from that, and we have decided that the teacher will ask you questions and you'll regurgitate it back to the teacher. And then that was a pain for the teacher to have to say. You know, back when I was in school, the teacher would ask us questions. This is notebooking paper. And we would take notebook paper and we would have to number it ourselves. There's going to be 15 questions on the quiz. We'd write 1 through 15 down the side and have to answer the 15 questions that the teacher would say from the front of the room. And he didn't even have to bother typing up a test or handing it out. Later, the copy machine was developed. Before that was a mimeograph machine. And so they would then write out questions and have a blank, and you'd have to fill in the blank. After that, it was Scantron, and so you'd have just like you do an achievement test, you'd have the little dots that you'd have to fill out and fill in the circle with your pencil. And I think the reason for that is the class size got larger, and so the Scantron was handy because as long as you made it a multiple choice answer, you could scan those through a machine that would read those dots and then spit back out to the teacher what each grade was for all the students in his class. Really, that's because of the large class size and having to grade. If you're in college, have hundreds of students, you could grade all of those tests very quickly. And I get that. That makes sense. Being efficient is fine, but why do I need that in my homeschool? The point, really, of all of this, regurgitating back of information that we have heard or read, is for us to see if our child has learned it. Sometimes when you copy what you have learned from somebody, you remember it so much better than if you just talk about it even. Something about using the hand really helps us to remember what we have learned. Notebooking can take two forms. It can be the everyday kind of copying what we have seen and heard and writing it down so that we'll remember it. And it can also be the test and the quiz. So you could have the quiz would show you 5 things that you want your student to remember from that history lesson, and you want them, so then let's say it's Friday morning and you say, I want you to get out a piece of paper and number it to 5, and I want you to write those 5 things that you've learned. So it's the same idea. Now, our premise at Homeschooling Torah is that we're going to use the Bible for every subject. I have not been able to find notebooking in the Bible, sort of. Because you know me, I wanted to look and see if I could find it. I think if I were going to find it anywhere in the Bible, I would find it in the description of a sefer, or someone who is a scribe. That's how we would normally know that word. And that is someone who counts the money, who keeps track of the journals and what happens in the history books. They are the people who copy the Torah and present new copies to the king or to the priest or whoever. They are basically someone who writes with a pen. We have found through our own experience in homeschooling for many, many years now, 23 years at least I've been homeschooling, not counting all the years before that I had little ones. So I found that tests and quizzes and worksheets are okay, but the thing that really makes learning stick for my children is notebooking. Another thing about notebooking is that it's really useful if I'm teaching all my children at the same time. I'm sure you've had the question, how am I supposed to teach a high school student, a middle school student, an elementary school student, and a preschooler? They aren't, at the same level of learning in all the different subjects. And I do agree that's true in some things like phonics and some mathematics. But notebooking has really made it possible for me to give assignments to each child at their level and to find out if they are actually grasping what we're talking about. It's so easy to look at my child's paper at whatever age, whether that's an 18-year-old or a 6-year-old, and say, yes, she got it. She really understood what we were talking about today. And I think the very process of writing something down, drawing it, uses so many different parts of the brain that it's sure to stick better than a multiple choice or fill in the blank worksheet. So while I'm not completely opposed to using worksheets, I think notebooking is so much more practical. And on top of everything else, it also gives you a ready-made portfolio, which portfolios are required in some states. They are awesome for all grandmothers everywhere, and they really give you a good glimpse of how your child is progressing. Like, just take handwriting for instance. As you look at your child's notebooking pages over the years, you can see them grow, you can see them mature, you can see the use of English language mature, you can see their neatness and tidiness, you can see them really wrestling with ideas, and I love it for all of those reasons. So today I want to give you 5 steps to make notebooking easy for you. And really the trick is to have a routine that you always go through and to have all of the supplies that you need ready at hand. Now these are our family's colored pencils, and what we have is in our dining room, where the dining room table is, we have a cabinet, and it has bookshelves above and drawers down below, and in those drawers, I'm trying to think, we have all kinds of really amazing things. I have cookbooks in one drawer. We have in another drawer everything for Erev Shabbat, which that means our little worship that we go through in prayers. We have our Passover Seders. We have the special little candelabra that I like to put out. We have all kinds of those things. In another drawer, I have plastic placemats so that the kids can color. If I have a nice tablecloth on, they could put those out and color. I've got everything from the maps to the little cursive ones. And my kids are actually older than that now, but my 18-year-old daughter likes to put that out and do her nails. And, so that's in one drawer. In another drawer, I have all of my teacher supplies that I need for school. So that's where I put my teacher binder, and that's where I put the books that we're reading in history. It's where we have our timelines and our map track book. We have, what else is in there? Michigan history books, just anything that I'm using right now in homeschooling for me. Then in the drawer underneath that, we have all of our manipulatives, math, flashcards, just everything that we use mostly for math. I also have letter magnets, and we have our Hebrew flashcards, vocabulary flashcards and stuff in there as well. And then in the bottom drawer, we have all of our notebooking things. So I have things like some scrapbooking paper, not a ton, but my sister-in-law likes to scrapbook, so she'll give us extras sometimes. I have some construction paper, and then I have a stack of just plain white paper. I have tracing paper for making maps. I have markers, colored pencils, crayons. We have glue sticks and scissors and whiteout and a hole punch. Let me see if I can show you that way, the front way. And all of those things are in that drawer ready to go for notebooking. So I'm trying to think if I missed anything. I don't think so. So basically, when we get ready to do a subject and we know that today we're going to have a notebooking assignment, and by the way, those are scheduled for you in our history and science curriculum. So we just pull out those things. Specifically, I wanted to bring these out and show you because these are the two things that I really do pull out every day, plus my hole punch. So this is just a bag of colored pencils. My children are a little bit older than maybe some of yours. Crayons are what we used to use, but colored pencils are pretty awesome at about any age, and I like them because you can add some color to your maps or whatever you're doing, and it's just really nice. We also have a little tiny pencil sharpener. I have a nicer pencil sharpener in the other room, but this one is just handy, and so we keep it with it. And in this tote we have scissors and glue sticks in case we're cutting out pictures that we might find on the internet and we want to paste those into our notebooking pages. We also have whiteout. I just realized I think I have my daughter's whiteout here because there shouldn't be two. Anyway, we have whiteout. These are really great for making when our children make mistakes, and sometimes they use them in copy work as well, especially if they're copying scriptures and they make a mistake. They can easily fix it. These are wonderful. I buy these in bulk on Amazon. And then I have a hole punch. Now, my hole punch may not look exactly like yours. I got this hole punch, you won't believe it, in 1992 as my parents took me school shopping before I went to college. And so this one was in my original dorm room, and I've had it ever since. It's great. It's just a swing line. My husband has one that's a little bit newer, a little bit smaller, so maybe you don't need one so bulky, but I like this one. It's mine. I've had it forever. So that's what, those are some supplies that we have. So I also have pens and regular pencils, and I have like thin line Sharpies because those are nice sometimes. So just all kinds of pens and pencils, ways to color, whiteout, scissors and glue, hole punch, and then we have a laptop that we keep handy. You don't have to have a laptop. My daughter has a tablet, but it's nice to look things up. Sometimes when we're notebooking, we want to research something a little bit further. Nearby, right above those drawers, are the bookshelves that have my Strong's Concordance and all of our dictionaries, all of our atlases, and so on. So everything is really close by. I think that's a key to notebooking. If you have to go a long ways to get supplies, yeah, it's not as exciting and enticing to have to do this every day. Make it at your fingertips. Many times, and not specifically this year, but in the past when my children were younger, I had totes that would had a handle on them and little spots to put the scissors and the colored pencils and everything, and we could put those right on the table. Other years my children have each had their own box like that, and they've had it in their bag that holds all their school books. So because each of my children has their own big tote bag, and then we've done tote bags. Other years we've done crates like you can use to put hanging files in. They look like egg crates, but you can buy them in the office supply section. Some homeschool moms I know have a cart with drawers so that they can roll up to the school table. All of those are great ideas. As long as you find a system that works for you and you have everything at your fingertips and ready to go, I think you'll like notebooking. To me, it's the setup and the cleanup that's the pain. I also have a little wastebasket right there, right by the dining room, and it's hidden under my desk most of the times because my desk is there too. But I pull it out and I put that there, and that way if kids are cutting and making a mess, they can immediately put it in the wastebasket. And that also makes notebooking nicer when everyone picks up their mess before they go off to do something else. So that's setting up. As soon as you're set up, I want to mention, what are we going to notebook into? I think as a family, and I asked my kids this, and they all agreed for the most part. We have 5 things, it must be the day for fives. We have 5 things that we tend to use to notebook on as far as paper. By far, our favorite one is just plain copy paper, print paper that you can get, 500 in a ream very inexpensively at your local big box store. And that's why I need the hole punch. So that's what we use the most. And as soon as the kids have done their notebooking, it goes into their 3-ring binder. When our children are doing maps, we like tracing paper, and you can get tracing paper. It's just a little lighter weight. You can see through it so you can trace things. That's handy at times. Sometimes it's so lightweight that it's nice to glue it or scotch tape it onto the heavier paper. And again, you're going to need your 3-hole punch. When my children were younger, we were constantly using college rule paper. College rule paper, and I say college rule, my kids weren't college. About 2nd or 3rd grade, my kids switched over to this. We just like the lines being a little bit closer together. That is totally a preference. You may do it, with you like the wide rule better. However it works for you, those work great, and you can tape a picture on, or you can just draw right over the lines. My husband chimed in at this point and said if he were doing notebooking, he might like graph paper, or that paper you can get that has dots all over it. We don't have that at our home, but I'm sure you could easily access that online. A favorite of many people is a composition book. Now, my children do use composition books for their copy work, and I'll show you that in the session on copy work. But this is a favorite of many people for notebooking because, well, first of all, sometimes those pages with the 3-hole punches in them that get put in the binders can get ripped out and torn and lost, especially if children are a little rough with their binders, which children can be at times. So these are great because they're saddle stitched and you're not going to lose them. They're going to stay in there. And again, I prefer the college rule, but you can get wide rule, whatever works for your family. And then yet another option would be the spiral bound, which these are so inexpensive. Really, both of these are. And right now you might be able to find school supplies on sale near you. So go see what works. Talk to your kids and get their preference. If a child likes the book that they're using, they're going to like it, notebooking better. I suppose you could even get blank journals or journals that you do artwork in. And if you're doing things like watercolor for your notebooking, which if you're artistic, you might enjoy that, then you might like that kind of weight of paper, or you might like a permanent, beautiful journal. If your kids are going to be anything like my kids, they're going to get just as in love with the school supply section or the art supply section of a local crafts store as my husband and I are. So that's kind of what I'm hoping. You don't have to just be artistic. A lot of what we do in notebooking is writing, but it's nice to have options for both. So those are ideas. Go shopping with your kids and get their input and see what they like. So those are some of the supplies. That's the paper that we use. Now, here are the 5 steps to make notebooking easy. Number 1, copy down what you have learned today. So let's say you're reading in history and there was just one paragraph that really summarized what you've learned today, and it just really stuck out to your family, or there was a quote. Sometimes, when I'm reading to my family, there's a sentence that just makes me kind of cry. I don't know if any of you cry when you're reading from the history books, but sometimes I do. Definitely in the Bible I do. So those things are awesome to copy down into your notebooks so that you remember them long term. Do my children copy every day? Well, they do for their scripture copy work, which to me is an entirely different subject. So we'll talk about that later. But in our history and science and Bible, no, we don't copy every day. We copy once in a while, only when we see those really awesome things, because it would get tedious to do so much copying in every single subject. But sometimes it's really handy. We also like to copy timelines, and we like to copy maps. So those are just some ideas, but that was just number 1. Number 2, we like to describe what we learned today. We start this out with my younger children, or children that are new to homeschooling. You want to keep this in mind. We start this out by, I ask the children, what did you learn today? And then they say back to me a sentence. For the young children, I'll just copy it myself. I'll copy what they say, and I'll write down the description of what they've learned. As the children get older, I will ask them to do it, and they can just, I'll ask them what they learned that day, and they can just write it directly on a piece of paper. A lot of children struggle right here because they don't know what to say. So this is where we use our 6 serving men. This is in our writing curriculum, but this is also so useful for notebooking. The 6 serving men are who, what, when, where, why, and how. And I will often just write that up on the board. And yeah, my children have been doing this for a long time, but sometimes we just look at each other blank, like, okay, what do we say about Beethoven as we're studying him today in world history? Okay, who was he? Let's write out his word. Let's learn how to spell his name. That's often a challenge. Let's discuss, what country is he from and why is his name spelled pronounced Beethoven when it looks like Beethoven. And we'll have those discussions. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Those cover pretty much any subject, no matter who we're learning about or what the topic is. So I'll write those 6 serving men up on the chalkboard, and my kids will start to ponder. And we'll talk it out. We don't have to just go straight to writing. And I'm not looking necessarily for complete sentences right here. Oftentimes, notebooking is just short and sweet and to the point because we have other things we want to do with our day. So sometimes, however, I will give my students a writing assignment. This is especially useful the year that we're going through our actual writing curriculum or the writing prompts curriculum that both of those are at Homeschooling Torah. So it will often say, what did you learn in your history today? And write an essay about it. Or it will have persuasive essays or any of the other multitude of essays that are assigned in the writing curriculum. And those are really handy. Sometimes the history and the science curriculum will say to your high school student, please explain what the worldview was that was going on during this battle. And they'll have to write that out. Or can you describe evolution and how did this affect this event in history? And so we'll have to write an essay. At those times, I require my children to start with a topic sentence and then list 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 things under it, and then have a nice conclusion. And so we're talking about on a piece of notebook paper, we're talking, about that much, maybe a full page, but I usually don't want them to go to the back because that's just getting too wordy, and I want them to learn to be concise. Even as they write their essays, those 6 serving men can really help, and they don't necessarily have to use all of the who, what, when, where, why, and how, but they definitely can use them to think through, what am I going to say? Some essays are better for why, so you might think of 3 things. 3 is such a handy number when you're writing something. So a topic sentence, 3 things, and a nice conclusion, and your essay is done. So we've got copying, describing, which can sometimes mean writing down an essay. Wait, let's go back to kindergarten. What would a kindergartner do? Well, a kindergartner might describe it with 1 sentence, and again, I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to write it maybe near the bottom, and then I'll say draw a picture, because number 3 is to draw. I think the reason I like it when my children draw an illustration to accompany their writing, whether they're in kindergarten or 12th grade, is that it uses a different part of the brain. So our words come from one side, and our artistic images and visual ways of looking at the world come from the entirely different side. So if I'm having my children access both the right and the left brain when they're doing their notebooking, I feel like they're going to learn it better. So hey, I love having them draw a picture. Now, drawing a picture doesn't mean that they're a great artist. I am not a great artist. I'm fantastic at drawing a stick figure. Sometimes that means that a child that's not great at drawing might prefer to copy a picture. And so you might spend a couple minutes on the internet, find a picture that is really just perfect, and then specifically like a diagram, that would be even better. And then print that and use your tracing paper that you have to trace over that. And the trace is they're using that visual side of their brain, and then cut it out, paste it into the notebook, and have the sentences or the paragraphs of description underneath it. Number 4, I like to have my children label things. So if you have a picture, let's make sure we label it. We don't ever want to have things in our notebook that aren't clearly identified as to what they are. I like to include the child's name and the date in the corner. Sometimes we don't remember that, but I'll tell you why that's important. I didn't used to think it was. I mean, after all, I know who did it, and I know which child it was. Yeah, I do, but some of my children have now graduated from high school. And when we get to their graduation open houses, we like to go downstairs to the boxes where we've stored their stuff from school, and we like to pull out samples to put out on a table at their graduation open house. And I will tell you what, this year my 18-year-old daughter graduated and had her open house, and I still had down there boxes from all my children, all 7 had stuff down there. And some of it I had just put down there in a hurry and kind of mixed it up together because I was in a rush at that time and, not perfect about organizing everything. And when we brought it up to the living room and we kind of spread it out, I couldn't tell whose was whose. Their handwriting was eerily similar. And I knew we had covered those topics, but we did them together. So how was I supposed to tell? So for your own sake, Mom, I really recommend that you put the name and the date up there in the corner. It just takes a child a second. They'd be doing it for school, and it's just really helpful for forgetful parents later when they want to look back through things. Otherwise, labeling, you're going to think of those who, what, when, where, why, and how again, and specifically putting on dates, names of people, the names of cities, countries, continents. If it's science, you're going to label maybe the parts of a plant or the parts of a butterfly. You're going to tell about a molecule for chemistry, and you're going to want to label it and tell maybe about the reaction that happens, and you're going to do your work and tell why it was this way. Maybe you're going to have a graph showing the population during the Black Plague. And so you're going to label it clearly and the dates that you're talking about. So labeling is a really valuable skill for your children, and I really recommend it. So number 5 is now time to give it to mom and have you evaluate it, and then you're going to save it for the future. So evaluating, you can do it in one of two ways. Sometimes I don't like it when they give them to me and they get stuck on my desk, because over a course of a couple weeks the papers can stack up. I kind of prefer to have my kids keep them in their 3-ring binders, and then once a week I just say, leave your binders on the table, and I'm going to come look at them. And it just takes me a minute to flip open to the history section or the science section and see what the kids have done that week. And if you only have several kids, that's not going to be that hard. And then after you're done, they can come get their binders and put them away. I like to put the responsibility more on them than on me. So when I'm evaluating, I have 3 things here that I evaluate for. First of all, I want my children to do things neat and tidy. Neat and tidy is what I say a lot around our house when they're doing, whether it's math or copy work, or they're writing in their phonics worksheets, or they're doing their notebooking pages. I'm always saying neat and tidy, neat and tidy. It's a character trait that I want to develop in my children. The reason we work to have neatness and tidiness is so that others can understand what we've written. What good is it to communicate if nobody can read our handwriting? Now, that doesn't mean that all my children have fantastic handwriting. Some of them have some special needs, and handwriting is really difficult for them. And some of them are lazy and don't feel like it that day. Or I don't know if any of you are like me, but sometimes when I'm tired, my handwriting suffers, and I can tell, oh my goodness, I need to get to bed a little earlier tonight, because look at that, my handwriting's bad. And that means that maybe I'm fighting a little adrenal fatigue, or I'm just lacking sleep, period. And so my handwriting is a good sign. And you can evaluate your own children's handwriting and say, maybe we all need to go to bed tonight a little earlier. But making things neat is a grade in my home. If I can tell that it was intentional. I'm looking for heart qualities here, and not necessarily physical ability. I'm looking for a heart that strives to do things neat and tidy, a heart that isn't lazy and wants to do things to our best. Whatever we find to put our hand to, we want to do it with all our might, and that is what the Bible says. So I want my children to do things neat and tidy, but I also use a little bit of judgment, and I can tell that they've had a hard week. And I'm not going to evaluate that quite as hard as I would if I knew they were able and just didn't feel like it. That's going to get a worse grade. Then I look for spelling and word usage, grammar, punctuation, things like that. Now, I don't love when parents take a red pen to a notebooking page that children have worked really hard on and just circle all the things that are wrong. In fact, I very rarely do. If my children wrote in pencil, now that's a different matter. I might have them erase and rewrite that word. And so that's a point in favor of doing it in pencil. But a point in favor of using non-erasable pens, pencils, colored pencils, and so on is that it just sometimes looks better. So if I see there's a grammar or spelling error on there, I will take my teacher binder and I will make a note to next week sometime when we're on our spelling lessons, which is a separate subject. We are going to talk about how to spell that word, and we're going to have them write it several times and so on. So if it's a grammar mistake or punctuation or capital letter and it's something we've already learned, then I'll point it out and then maybe again review it next week. So this goes back to why I love sticky notes, and this is the use of a sticky note. I write all this down. My kids, all my girls' names start with a K, and all my boys' names start with an A. So like the third daughter who starts with a K, she's K3. So on my sticky note, I'll put K3, work on spelling Europe, okay? Because maybe she misspelled it. And then I'll take the sticky note and put it in my teacher binder right on my Together School Planner that we're going to use next week. So that way I don't forget, but it doesn't make me feel like I'm always finding the mistakes, always being critical. And it doesn't mean I don't point them out, but I try to be more encouraging than critical. And this isn't really something I so much as grade for as just notice so that I can help them in the future. Finally, I check and make sure that they were actually putting the information I was looking for on their notebooking page. So often in science and history, we specifically say, or Bible for that matter, we specifically say what we want them to put on the notebooking page. So first and foremost, I'm looking to see if they followed directions. If they followed directions and answered the questions, then I give them a good grade for that. If it's an older child and I see that they didn't, dog's barking, I see that they really didn't put much effort into finding out anything new and interesting, they were just, again, it's hard attitude, then I won't give them as good of a grade. So what I'm thinking about as I'm grading is more just to see that they have learned something and that they are putting their best effort in. Now I go then to my teacher planner, and on here I write down what the grade was for that child for that assignment, and it's really pretty easy to mark. Now sometimes, especially since the Together School section is at the top and that's where a lot of our notebooking is, I will use the section over here to just write down a real quick note to myself as to who got what grade, because we tend to only have 1 or 2 notebooking assignments per week in each subject. So, and sometimes in history, I don't notebook, or in science, it'll say to do a notebooking assignment, but we're just having a rough week, and I'll just say, instead of a notebooking assignment today, we're just gonna have a quick discussion. You tell me about this, and we just vocalize it. But again, overall, I think that putting it on paper is a lot better for long-term retention. So in your handout for this session, we're going to give you a list of some conversation starters and notebooking ideas to get you going, and you can stick that into your teacher notebook and have it ready to go in case you all are drawing a blank someday and the 6 serving men aren't helping you out, okay? If you have a high school student or a middle school student who is able to write out a paragraph or an essay, check our writing curriculum at homeschoolingtorah.com for an entire section, entire unit on how to write a good essay and what that looks like. And if your student has covered that section, then I think you should require it of your students, and that should be part of your grading. So I hope that helped. I hope that you will try notebooking if you've never done it before. Determine in your heart that you're going to try it at least once a week this year, whether it's in Bible, history, or science, and sometimes it could be in spelling or other subjects. Pick one of them and try it and see how it goes. Be ready with all your supplies so it's not difficult, and give it a try. Let me know how it goes. I would love to hear from you on that.